Well, it's been 10 years since the Link Cafe siege, a harrowing day that irrevocably changed Australia. Joining me now is Troy Grant, who was the Deputy Premier of New South Wales at the time of the attack. Troy, thanks for your time this morning. Now, you were a leader on that horrifying day, but also, most importantly, a human being. 10 years on, how do you feel?
Oh, look, it's extraordinary to think how quickly 10 years has passed, particularly given the magnitude of the event on the day. It affected so many people I've seen over the last 10 years in so many different ways. Obviously, the victims and their families are the ones that we think about every day since that incident, and how harrowing and how difficult it's been over the last decade for them. But obviously, as a former police officer and becoming police minister, I was intimately involved in the response to the coronial investigations. I saw the impact that the siege and the following coronial inquest had on the police force and the changes that occurred. The soul searching, the deep thought, and the changing to improve a lot of missteps that were identified in the coroner's report really hit home.
Absolutely. I mean, that day would have changed your life forever. As you said, you later became police minister, tasked with overseeing many of those changes recommended after the siege. Are you confident now police are better prepared to deal with circumstances like this?
Yeah, I am. There was legislative changes. There was a lot of internal practices and policy changes that were undertaken. And I spent a fair bit of time with the police when they were going through some of those sessions in reviewing what and how they would respond. And you've got to understand that every situation's different. There's never going to be a perfect response. They can only ever do their very best with the information that's provided. And on that particular day, the information was mixed and scrambled. There was some failings that were identified in the coroner's court that hopefully won't be repeated in another incident of its type. And hopefully we don't have another incident of that sort ever again. But we can only be confident that things will get better. But until it happens, that won't ever really be properly tested.
I mean, can you talk us through that day, Troy? I mean, I've read up on where you were on that day and your experience, but perhaps for our viewers, if you can just explain sort of where you were when you knew that something terrible was happening on that day.
Yeah, I was in my office directly above Link Cafe, and I was just looking outside the window when I saw the first police response occur. And I assumed it was something like an armed hold-up or a sort of an incident where an inner and an outer perimeter needed to be established. And being a former police officer, I beckoned my staff over to have a look, and I was describing to them how the police had set up that inner and outer perimeter. So we were watching on the 20th floor down for a while, and as it unfolded, then we saw the flag. The first time it popped up, it was only up for a short bit and then it went away again. But then we knew something was wrong, and nearly immediately a number of phone calls came into our office, as I was the arts minister at the time, and there was a number of bomb threats at cultural institutions that we had to respond to, and things very, very rapidly escalated from there. Premier Baird was out at an event at the time, so the Deputy's office and the Premier's office, side by side in Martin Place, we connected. A plan of action was put into place to evacuate Martin Place building above the Channel 7 offices at the time. And then we moved to Parliament House, where we gathered, assembled the crisis committee, and then made our way to the New South Wales Crisis Centre, where we then enacted the crisis centre and managed the incident as per the disaster plans that were in place. And then a long 16 hours unfolded.
I mean, Australia changed after that day, the entire country watching the horror unfold on our screens. We can't imagine what it would have been like to be there and be in their leadership role as well. But as I mentioned before, at the core of it, you're still a human being. How did that change and impact your life, that moment?
I think the magnitude of the event and the realisation that you were in the front row seat for what was something that will go down in our country's history as one of the most fearsome events that you could ever imagine happening to a community. Personally, I dealt with a lot of life and death situations and a lot of crises because of my policing background. So I was deeply affected by it, but I think affected differently to some others in the executive who had never been in a life and death situation as well. And I know it has deeply affected a number of them throughout the last decade. When you are in charge and responsible to a large degree, but then have no control over the tactical or on the ground response, which is rightly so the remit of the police force, who are the experts in this area, you feel a little bit like a passenger. So there's a vulnerability that you feel. And I think that vulnerability and what more could we have done, what more was there to be done from our position, I think are questions that live with us now, even 10 years later. And I know that every minister that was involved right throughout the siege and the crisis centre work is affected to some degree in that sort of manner.
Some really powerful words, and you see those images on the screen there, and it just brings back such memories. The Premier, Chris Minns, also speaking before, and that stood out to me. He said goodness and unity and solidarity will always rise above, and it's so true. When something like this happens, so many people come together and unite in the face of such hatred. I just want to get your thoughts on something. We do have to wrap things up, but this year ASIO lifted Australia's terror threat to probable. What are your thoughts on this, and I guess the rise in anti-Semitism as well?
Oh, it's deeply concerning. It's something that all governments at all levels need to be razor sharply focused on. The law enforcement bodies responsible for response need to be resourced and supported to every means possible to keep our community safe. And as we've seen with any terror incident right across the world, their intent is to divide and spread fear. And what we saw in the response was that usually unites and makes us more powerful as a community. And I know we will unite over this very divisive issue at the moment in time, but everyone needs to be focused and pushing in the same direction to ensure that occurs. This is not the country that accepts division or terrorism at any level, and we need to unite to fight back against any people or groups who are trying to divide us in any way.
Troy Grant, powerful words there. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it and talking to us about your experience on that day. Thank you so much and take care.